Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Most Accurate Podcast. I am your host, Addison Hayes, joined as always by one of the most accurate rankers in all of the fantasy community, John Paulson. John, how are we doing this fine
I'm doing all
afternoon?
right. I just got off of a podcast with Chris Allen where we did a deep dive into the running back position. So look for that on the 4for4 Most Accurate Podcast feed. Looking forward to talking some arbitrage with you today, Addison.
Yes, because apparently I learned that was the term for what we're doing today. Because I was doing this on the DLF side for Dynasty, talking through, I called it Dynasty Alternatives, where essentially we're looking for players that are valued cheaper than other players, but have similar situations, projections, stats, all that kind of stuff. Then John let me know that, hey, this is actually called Fantasy Arbitrage Plays. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to have to rename that for the Dynasty side. So it'll be Dynasty Arbitrage. But today is redraft arbitrage. So we each have two pairings of players. One player is valued a little bit higher in fantasy drafts than the other. Not to say that we're necessarily against drafting the higher priced player, but it is important to highlight the lower drafted player as somebody that you could target later in your drafts and get very similar production to somebody who's going much earlier in drafts. Before we dive into those, though, I do want to touch on the news that came out this morning. We're recording this Thursday afternoon here for me on the East Coast. So this news kind of broke earlier this morning that Rashee Rice's NFL disciplinary hearing is set for Tuesday, September 30th, which means in the NFL schedule and calendar, that is going to allow him to play the first 4 weeks of the NFL season before any potential suspension gets handed down. It is also possible, I guess, that he doesn't get suspended immediately after the hearing. So theoretically, he could play the first 4 games completely fine, then maybe play another week or 2 or 3, and then get suspended. So, and the Chiefs also have a week 10 bye that kind of gets thrown into there as well. So this kind of muddies the Rashee Rice situation a lot because you're going to get the initial start to the year, but then you're going to be having that suspension still hang over you where he might not be available to you leading into the playoffs, in the actual playoffs. And so it just becomes a lot muddier of a situation to actually draft him in his 5th round ADP that I don't know if that's going to go up or go down based on this news, but I feel like I'm even more terrified to draft Rashee Rice today because of this news than I was before hearing the news that his suspension isn't going to come down until at least week 5, it seems. John, are you kind of on the same board
Yeah,
as me?
I'd rather have him miss the first part of the season where you have other receivers not on bye, relatively healthy roster in order to try to get by. It looks like the general consensus is it's going to be a 6-game suspension. I don't know how exactly we came to that conclusion. He's just sort of been somebody I haven't drafted because he's typically going off the board before I'm willing to take him. However, he has significant value. 7 for 103 on 9 targets, 5 for 75 and a touchdown on 6 targets, 12 for 110 and a touchdown on 14 targets. The first 3 weeks of the season, you do wonder if he's going to see that same sort of usage now that Xavier Worthy is really fully broken out into his career and, a viable wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 type real world. Yeah, I mean, you might look at him. He's gone from like week 5 until week 10. That's a tough road to hoe to hold him for that long during all these different bye weeks where you have to have players on your bench to fill in, and he's eating up a roster spot while all these other players are going on bye.
I think my other fear too is, of course, he's coming off of the injury. If he's slow to start the year because he's getting reacclimated from that injury, we see that all the time where, especially with, pretty severe knee injuries, that, the first few games that a player returns, they're not necessarily up to speed. And if those first 4 games don't look all that great for Rice because of the injury, you're not going to get the great production possibly out of him. Then he's going to get suspended. Then what are you going to do? If he comes back week 13 or 14, we'll say that's like the end of his suspension, right? Are you going to play him in the playoffs then? Do you trust that and putting him in the most critical time of year after a poor start to the year than a 6-game suspension where he's not involved with team activities whatsoever. Then you're going to throw him in your lineups leading up to and into the fantasy playoffs. That terrifies the crap out of me. I would have much rather have had him sit for the first 6 games of the year, which I think also would have doubly benefited in terms that he could have gotten fully healthy. He didn't have to play those first 6 games. He could have been even more healthy than he would have when he started in the beginning of the year, coming back in mid to late October. And I'm really terrified. I think he is just completely off my board now, especially at a 5th-round ADP. I just can't imagine drafting him at all.
I concur.
Excellent. Well, let's move on to the actual topic of today's show. As I mentioned, the redraft arbitrage plays. I have my first pairing in here, and I want to talk through Tyreek Hill versus Calvin Ridley. So Tyreek Hill obviously is a mid 3rd-round ADP coming off of a relatively down year with the Miami Dolphins, but is still Tyreek Hill. And he looks substantially better with Tua on the field versus without Tua. He also had that wrist injury that a lot of people are kind of excusing his second half of the season play, or most of the season play, because of that wrist injury, plus Tua's absence, really just destroying the Dolphins season as a whole in 2024. And then you have Calvin Ridley, who's a early 6th-round ADP. His ADP has drastically been rising over the past few weeks, especially after their first preseason game where he had 3 catches for 50 yards with Cam Ward in just 2 drives. He looks like an alpha wide receiver that has the potential to be a very, very good fantasy wide receiver. And so I'm really in on drafting Calvin Ridley. He's been one of my favorite targets, especially early on in when his ADP was in like the 7th round. Now it's in the 6th round. Even if he has to be a 5th-round pick, I would rather draft Calvin Ridley in the 5th round than Rashee Rice in the 5th round. That's where I'm at basically with those two. 2024 was Calvin Ridley's lowest targets per game since his rookie year, his lowest receptions per game of his entire career, lowest catch percentage of his entire career, and the lowest touchdown total he's had in a full season of play by a pretty decent margin. He always had generally between 7 to 10 receiving touchdowns in a season. Last year, he only put up 4. Even the year before that, when he was in Jacksonville, he still had 8 receiving touchdowns. He also had a 67.5% catchable targets percentage, which was 3rd lowest among all wide receivers last year with at least 75 targets. Enter Cam Ward now, who's a substantially better and more accurate passer than Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. I really do think that Terry McLaurin has a chance to be, or Calvin Ridley has a chance to be this year's version of Terry McLaurin. We saw the usage, like I mentioned, in the first preseason game. So if he's scoring more touchdowns, if he's getting more catchable targets, leading to more receptions and more yards, he's got the big playability. My hot take this year personally is that Calvin Ridley is going to be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, just like how Terry McLaurin was last year. Ladd McConkey last year had 82 receptions for 1,150 yards and 7 touchdowns and was the PPR wide receiver 13. Tyreek Hill's pace last year with Tua healthy, 85 receptions for just under 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. I think Calvin Ridley can do both of those stat lines relatively easy, meaning that he is an easy top 15 fantasy wide receiver, if not even, like I said, my hot take, that he is a top 10 fantasy wide receiver.
That was a lot, but I mostly agree with you. The buzz out of camp is that Cam Ward has looked good. I mean, there isn't a lot going, we don't get a lot of reports from Titans camp. I mean, we got the 101 who's a quarterback, and we're not getting that many. Usually this player is under a complete microscope and every throw is being charted, and but everything sounds good. Cam Ward looks good. Calvin Ridley looks good. He has almost no competition for targets. He's been moving up my projections. And the other thing that kind of prompted that is I went over and looked at Matt Harmon's reception perception profile of Ridley, and it is glowing. Not the all green chart, but all but 2 were green, which indicates he had a really good season getting open last year, even though quarterback play was not really there. Just a couple of areas where he could improve, which is the flat and the corner routes. And Matt made the same comparison that you did in terms of Terry McLaurin really benefiting from Jaden Daniels' arrival, those two helping each other out. This looks very similar. Cam Ward, Calvin Ridley top 15 season, top 20 season, I think, incoming for him. I've got him at 24 right now, and I was just looking at the guys around him. I don't know that I would take Cortland Sutton over him. I've got Cortland Sutton at 23, Xavier Worthy at 22. Xavier Worthy kind of scares me for the same reasons Rashee Rice. Well, for related reasons. You just don't know what you're going to get from Xavier Worthy when Rashee Rice is in the lineup. So I think Calvin Ridley should really be maybe at 22 right there with Devonta Smith and Terry McLaurin, who is not happy with his contract right now. So you could make an argument that Ridley should go ahead of McLaurin, given that uncertainty as well. So I think he's a great value in this early 6th round. I've got him ranked ahead of DK Metcalf, Zay Flowers, Jameson Williams, Ted McMillan, Rashee Rice, and George Pickens. So completely agree. I like the Calvin Ridley call.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, he is in our multi-site ADP coming off the board at the wide receiver 30 spot. So the fact that you have him at 24 just already showcases a value. And if you're even considering maybe raising him up even more, I mean, all the receivers that you just named, Flowers, Metcalf, Williams, Tet McMillan, Xavier Worthy, all those guys are being drafted ahead of Calvin Ridley. So I think he just represents a really nice value that more people are starting to notice. So his ADP, I think, is going to rise into that 5th round, but I am still easily drafting him in that 5th round range, especially whenever you compare him to very similar production that you could get out of Tyreek Hill in the mid 3rd. So like a 2-round discount, essentially, if Ridley even rises to the mid 5th. So amazing value for me. So John, fantasy arbitrage pairing number 1. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I do like the call that we have going on here.
Yeah, I
So
just would also add that I've been avoiding Tyreek Hill. I'm worried enough about his drop off in production last year, and I don't know. I'm not crazy about him in the 3rd round. So I don't have much. I have none. Tyreek Hill this year. So good call there with Hill and Ridley. For me, I sort of decided to do. You picked receiver, and I won't give away your next position, but we're doing one arbitrage at each position for fun. I am doing Breece Hall and Tony Pollard. This is a pretty significant 3-round difference between these two. Breece Hall is going 312, Tony Pollard going 701. And if you just look at last year, these two were actually pretty close in production. Breece Hall was RB18, Pollard is RB21. So really pretty close there, just even on a per game and a season-long basis. And then we have extraneous factors here, environmental factors. Braylon Allen, I'm seeing clips of him running like Derrick Henry. It does sound like he's going to have a pretty significant role in this offense, and they're trying to do the David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs thing with Hall in the Jahmyr Gibbs role and David Montgomery in the Braylon Allen in the David Montgomery role. I don't think they're going to be able to replicate the production, but if usage is anything like historically it's been from Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, then Hall's just a touch upside isn't going to be there. And Pollard saw 16.5 touches per game with a healthy Tyjae Spears last year, and it was over 24 touches per game in the 5 games that Tyjae Spears missed last year, and Tyjae Spears has a high ankle sprain. So Pollard should have a nice run out in September. I would not be surprised by the end of September if Pollard is outscoring Breece Hall at that point. Talent-wise, I don't know, if Breece Hall is that much better, if he's better at all than Tony Pollard. So I think this is just a market inefficiency here with these two. I'm not drafting Breece Hall at all, and I am targeting Pollard. We've talked about Pollard a few times on this podcast, but I'm targeting him pretty aggressively there in the 6th round, 7th round as my RB2 or RB3 if I've already got 2 running backs on the roster.
For those of you, if you watch the 4for4 YouTube channel, I have a video coming out Sunday, I believe, that is on 0 running back targets. If you were to target wide receivers or quarterbacks or tight ends early, who are some running backs that you can target later? First person on that list is Tony Pollard because of that 7th round ADP. I absolutely love the value of him for no reason whatsoever other than what it seems like people just believe that he is not as good as what he actually is, or that Tyjae Spears is going to cut more into his workload. But with the injury now, it is this is Tony Pollard's backfield. I mean, I was already in on Tony Pollard before the injury. Now you throw in the injury for Tyjae Spears, and it's really really easy to just click draft on him in that 6th, 7th round area. And I've also been avoiding Breece Hall at his 3rd round ADP too. It's just too scary for me. I know a lot of people were talking about him getting 220 carries or something like that, maybe another 50, 60 receptions, kind of like what he did the previous 2 years. But I I just can't get on board with betting on that happening again and what's probably going to be like a bad offense. I'm worried about Justin Fields being able to sustain drives. I know a lot of people talk about Justin Fields' check down rate to running backs as a positive thing, but they're using a percentage rather than raw attempts, because Justin Fields has never been somebody who just throws a bunch of passes every single week. His career high in passing yards, I think, is like 2,400 in a season. His career high in touchdowns, I think, is like 14 or 15. So if that's the pie that we're getting, you're going to have to, a lot of that's going to Garrett Wilson. Some of that's going to go to Mason Taylor and Alan Lazard, and, maybe they have the rookie Arian Smith there, Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen. And then Breece Hall gets some of that, as I'm sure, as well. But it just doesn't seem like somebody who is going to get enough volume to be able to match that 3rd round ADP as your RB2 or even RB1 on your team. Whereas Tony Pollard is going to get that volume, and he's probably going to be just as good, if not better, like you mentioned, John. So I absolutely love the call of avoiding Breece Hall, targeting Tony Pollard instead as that running back arbitrage spot. So my second pairing here then, and as John mentioned, we're going one per position here. So we've already hit running back and wide receiver. I'm going to take a look at the tight end position here and talk about Sam LaPorta versus Tucker Kraft. Now, Sam LaPorta is a very highly drafted player. I believe he's actually in the 5th round now. If I double check the multi-site ADP, yes, late 5th round ADP for Sam LaPorta as the tight end 4 off the board, versus Tucker Kraft going all the way down in the 9th round. That's probably about tight end 10 off the board for Tucker Kraft. And to me, this is way too big of a difference, of almost a 4-round ADP difference between two players who I think are just so similar in so many different ways. And we just haven't seen the true season-long ceiling potential of Tucker Kraft, like we've already kind of seen with Sam LaPorta, obviously finishing tight end 1 in 2023, and then how he ended last year. But Tucker Kraft, I think he's due for some really good production. I think he's the 2nd, or at worst the 3rd best receiver on the Green Bay Packers offense. And we already saw it at the beginning of last year. Tucker Kraft, through the first 9 weeks of the season last year, was the tight end 6 overall, finished as a tight end 10 over the entire course of 2024, while Sam LaPorta was a tight end 8 overall in 2024, but through the first 9 weeks was a tight end 18. I remember very specifically a lot of people in the dynasty streets were completely worried about Sam LaPorta. In the redraft streets, I remember people asking me if they can cut Sam LaPorta through that first half of the season. That's how bad it was for his production. And then from week 10 on, though, the scripts basically flipped. Sam LaPorta then became the tight end 5. Tucker Kraft then became the tight end 17. And I think we know why that happened for both of those teams. Through the first 9 weeks, Jared Goff for the Detroit Lions averaged 26 pass attempts per game. They were absolutely crushing every single team that they played. They were winning with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Sam LaPorta, while yes, was dealing with a little bit of an injury, just was not needed because they didn't need to, pass the ball that much because they were winning in so many different ways. Then the second half of the season hits. They have a whole bunch of defensive injuries. Jared Goff's pass attempts rise to 36 pass attempts per game, an extra 10 attempts per game of the second half than the first half. And Sam LaPorta then became a more necessary part of the offense, finished as a tight end 5 over the second half of the year. Tucker Kraft, complete opposite. At the beginning of the year for the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love was averaging 34 pass attempts per game. Then he gets hurt in week 8. So from week 10 on, Jordan Love averages 23 pass attempts per game, as they're also winning games with Josh Jacobs scoring twice every single week. And then Jordan Love just didn't need to throw it. So Tucker Kraft takes a hit from that. So I think we've seen the the upside for both players in the best situations in both of their offenses, but we've also seen the downsides and the floors of both of them in bad situations for their offenses. I personally think that Sam LaPorta has way greater target competition with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams and the running backs than Tucker Kraft does with Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden and Josh Jacobs and Romeo Dobbs. So I prefer Tucker Kraft's situation. And I think that he might be a more integral part of their offense than Sam LaPorta is with the Detroit Lions. So I am not drafting Sam LaPorta in the 5th round, and I would much rather get Tucker Kraft 4 rounds later in the 9th round, and you're probably getting very similar production out of a player 4 rounds later. And then the opportunity cost of Sam LaPorta, if you can get a Calvin Ridley or, a Travion Henderson or somebody like that in the 5th round, and then take Tucker Kraft 4 rounds later.
I like it. This is bringing back memories here of my FFPC Big Gorilla draft that I'm in. I ended up taking LaPorta at 411 and was planning to take Kraft at 811, but he got sniped on an timeout auto draft at 810. I was actually going to take both players. I thought LaPorta in tight end premium at 411 was a solid pick, and I kind of wanted to do a Jared Goff, kind of a cheaper Detroit stack. So it still might pan out because Goff's still on the board. We'll see. Ended up with Hunter Henry in the 11th, by the way. I was looking at him. He's a nice value. He's a nice value.
That. Yeah, I like that.
Good call. I think anybody that's been listening or reading my stuff knows that if I'm not getting a George Kittle in the 3rd round, who I really think that's a great value, given what's going on with San Francisco, Debo out of the way, receiver injuries with Juwan Jennings, who I still like. I don't know if he's just pretending to be injured. Do we have any feeling on that? It's kind of calf hold-in. Ricky Pearsall.
Hopefully he's
Ricky Pearsall is playing well, but also kind of injury prone so far in his career. I think George Kittle is going to be a big part of that offense throughout. If I don't get him, or if there's a 3rd round player that I decide I want to take over George Kittle, Tucker Kraft is my number 1 target at the tight end position. I just think at low end tight end 1 cost, you have top 5 upside. And there's just a lot of, as you get into tight end 4 through 8, there's just a lot of, uncertainty with LaPorta, Mark Andrews, who should have a good start to the season. Finished really well last year, but was very disappointing in the first month. David Njoku, I have at 6, plays in a really shaky offense. TJ Hawkinson should be better, but didn't look like a top 5 guy last year coming off the injury. Travis Kelce at 8. Where are we at with him? Big drops in efficiency last year. We also have more target competition, especially when Rashee Rice is not suspended. So you just have a lot of kind of uncertainty there at the tight end position. Tucker Kraft at 9 looks great. Tyler Warren at 10 looks pretty good. So I'm sort of bypassing that second group in most drafts and targeting Kraft. So I like it. I think that's a good arbitrage.
Excellent. Well, I don't want to give away the players, but if the people at home are sitting there and they're doing the math, and you said that we're doing 1 per position, I think they can figure out what position we're going for. But John, why don't you close out with our final fantasy arbitrage?
Yeah, I decided, I wanted to do a quarterback here to round out the positions, and it was a little tougher to decide who, because there's a lot that you could pick here, and none of them were like screaming at me like, oh, you have to do this, because there are players here that I am not avoiding, except for now I am sort of avoiding Caleb Williams. Saw a video of him unable to hit like those little net things from like 10 yards out, looking very frustrated. I'm hearing accuracy issues this year compared to last year. Accuracy is way down in camp. And anytime I hear anything negative in the preseason, I definitely am listening. It's positive stuff throughout the NFL. You take that all with a grain of salt, but if you're hearing negative stuff, it's usually not a great sign. And I think quarterback is too deep here to be taking a risk or counting on Caleb Williams as your QB1. So he's slid down. I think initial projections had him pretty high because I am bullish long-term with Ben Johnson. turning this offense around. And I am probably bullish long term on Caleb Williams getting it all together. But talking with Andy Behrens during the deep dive quarterback podcast, he's just, as a Bears fan, he's just really, you know, keeping his expectations in check, especially for the first part of the season for Caleb Williams. He doesn't think that this offense will really hit its stride until second half of the season. And you can't really forsake the first half and allow for all these struggles and expect to win fantasy matchups, especially in a onesie position where there's just lots of good options. So that all being said, Caleb Williams going in the mid ninth round right now, I think I'd rather just, if I'm in a position where I'm like, oh, well, Goff, Purdy, Love, Herbert, Dak are all off the board. Now you're looking at Caleb Williams, Drake May, CJ Stroud, JJ McCarthy. I'm just gonna pass on Caleb Williams, let somebody else take him, and then I'm gonna target JJ McCarthy in the middle of the 11th round. And the reason I'm picking him is they're fairly similar players in terms that they both run. They're both capable of running. They're both playing in offenses where we have a really good play caller, except Kevin O'Connell is way more entrenched and has his system locked in, whereas Ben Johnson's just trying to get it off the ground right now. Offensive weapons, pretty similar. Justin Jefferson is the best of the on the two teams. Compare him to DJ Moore, Jordan Addison. You compare him to Roma Dunze, TJ Hawkinson. You compare him to Colston Loveston. What is his last name? Loveland. God,
Loveland.
sorry. Colston Loveland. Colston Loveston is what I wanted to say. So I think you have better weapon. The backfields is better. I think in Minnesota, better. It's going to be a better offense. So why not take the quarterback who's, in the better offense? McCarthy has got, even though he was injured last year, he does have a year in the system. He's been doing mental reps for a year, and now he looks pretty good in camp so far. So I think that's my quarterback arbitrage.
We talked about fading Caleb Williams. I think it was last week. So this is a continuation of that, and I'm fully on board as well. He's just been a quarterback that, especially with all the hype because of Ben Johnson, because of Luther Burden and Colston Loveland, and year 2 of Roma Dunze and everything like that. He has gotten that hype that the year 2 breakout could be coming. And actually, I was reminded of a tweet that I put out earlier in the year, actually when Ben Johnson got hired. This was back in January. I made this tweet. I was basically looking at what did Ben Johnson do for Jared Goff from his first year in Detroit versus the his year 2 in Detroit, but with the addition of Ben Johnson as the play caller. His attempts per game was basically the same. His completion percentage dropped slightly by 2 percentage points, but that's because his yards per attempt went up a whole extra yard from 6.6 to 7.6. So I'd imagine because he was spreading the ball around and taking deeper shots, his completion percentage dropped slightly, but was still at 65%. His yards per game went up 11%. Touchdowns went up 20%. Interceptions went down 40% as well. So those are all fantastic numbers for Jared Goff in terms of what he did with Ben Johnson from year 1 in Detroit without him to year 2 with him. So I wanted to apply those same numbers to Caleb Williams' rookie season, in which case his 2025 numbers would be, around 32 attempts per game, 61% completion percentage, 231 yards per game, a touchdown and a half, 7.1 yards per attempt, which over 17 games is a projected stat line of around 3,900 yards, 24 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And then you also include on the fact that he runs, give him an extra 400 rushing yards, 2 to 3 more rushing touchdowns. That's not drastically different than what Patrick Mahomes did last year as the QB 11 overall, QB 13 in points per game. And I don't think that's drastically different than what a lot of other quarterbacks will do either. Like you look at, Aaron Rodgers last year was at 3,928. Justin Herbert was at 3,923. Brock Purdy in 15 games played got to 3,820. If you have Jordan Love, who was over 4,000 the previous year. You got CJ Stroud, who was up in that range as a rookie. Can he get back into that range again in year 3 with better weapons around him, hopefully, or at least healthy weapons around him? There's a lot of quarterbacks that are all very much in the same range, JJ McCarthy included. That we saw what the O'Connell system can do for Sam Darnold and other quarterbacks in that system that's not Kirk Cousins. And JJ McCarthy looks pretty solid. Why can't he just be the guy that can get 4,000 yards and 25 touchdowns as a floor with one of the best receiving cores around him, and probably one of the best, if not the second best wide receiver in the entire league right now. So with a 2-round difference, I'm in full agreement that there should be no reason that you should be targeting Caleb Williams in the 9th round when you can just get JJ McCarthy in the 11th round. So I'm in full agreement with you on that arbitrage as well, John.
May I add, because you're talking about Jared Goff in 2022, I wanted to look at his early season production to illustrate it a bit more with Ben Johnson's installation. And he had some good games early, but he also had some clunkers. He had at home 215 and 2 touchdowns against Philly. He had 256 and 4 touchdowns at home against Washington. So that's a good fantasy outing. At Minnesota, he had 277 yards and 1 touchdown. Seattle at home, 378 and 4. And then on the road, New England they got skunked 29-0, 229 yards and 0 touchdowns. Dallas, 228 yards, 0 touchdowns. Miami, 321 and 1. So, and then Green Bay at home, 137 and 2. So definitely not the consistent Goff that we grew accustomed to. And if you look at the second half of the season, from week 12 to week 17, he had at least 2 touchdowns in every game but 1. So that consistency started in the second half of the season. So we might see some good games out of Caleb. We're also looking at Goff, who was a vet at this point. You know, he was learning a new system, but had been through the ringer in LA and Detroit prior to all this. So we might see some inconsistent numbers from Caleb early on. And if that happens, he's just not going to return QB 12, 13 numbers that he's being drafted at right now.
That you were reading off all those stat lines, and I was like, man, that sounds like what Caleb did last year. Like he would have that one game where it was like, oh, this is the Caleb Williams that we drafted, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. The Bears won. And then like the following game, he has like 150 yards and 1 touchdown, 2 picks. And that was the Caleb Williams experience in 2024. And if that was what Jared Goff did in, his first, half of season with Ben Johnson, as a seasoned vet, like you mentioned, like that's rough for Caleb Williams. And then, as you were talking about at the very beginning, all the negative news that we're getting out of Bears camp in terms of how Caleb Williams is adjusting to the new offense, the accuracy issues, pair that with what we saw from him already last year. It's not like he's Lamar Jackson getting accustomed to a new offense that he had 2 years ago and then had a little bit of struggles, then super ascended. Like that was still Lamar Jackson. This is Caleb Williams, unproven. It could be Trevor Lawrence all over again, had a horrible year with Urban Meyer and then still wasn't all that great, in year 2, especially for the first half. So somebody that I definitely will be avoiding at his current ADP, especially if he is your quarterback 1 and he's not going to help you win games early on. That's just not good to say the least. So, those are the 4 arbitrage plays that we have, 1 from each position: Tyreek Hill to Calvin Ridley, Breece Hall to Tony Pollard, Sam LaPorta to Tucker Kraft, and Caleb Williams to JJ McCarthy. We're getting out of here pretty early, John. This is only like a 35-minute podcast, which after the last few that we did over an hour, it's kind of refreshing. So hopefully
yeah, I think it's okay. When I saw that you wanted to do 2 each, I was like, oh, we might be able to knock off a little early. So not bad. I would just want to add one other thing. I was counting this up. So in 6 of Goff's first 10 games with Ben Johnson, he threw for either 1 or 0 touchdowns. So through week 11, you were getting a 50-50, 60-40 proposition where you're getting 1 or 0 touchdowns from your quarterback. Not great.
And their week 1 matchup is against Minnesota.
Yeah,
so we're going to find out real quick if this arbitrage play paid off for you in week 1. And then Chicago also gets in Detroit, then at home against Dallas, and then in Vegas. Those are the first 4 weeks.
Dallas and Vegas might be good games for him. We'll see.
They might be, but that first, Minnesota and Detroit, that's not easy.
In division.
So, All right, enough down talking about Caleb Williams. We can get out of here. So appreciate everybody for listening or watching. Hit that like and subscribe button depending on the platform that you are using to consume this content. We very much appreciate it. If you are interested in signing up for a subscription for 4 for 4 and get access to John Paulson's most accurate rankings and projections for your fantasy draft, or weekly projections in season to help you with your start sit decisions, you can sign up for a subscription at 4for4.com/plans. Use the promo code YouTube at checkout for 25% off. That also works for the DFS and betting plans as well. So if you're interested in us helping you, make some DFS lineups or make some prop bets, then use the promo code YouTube at checkout for 25% off.
Also, we have partnered with Splash Sports, and I'm being told we need to talk about this on the podcast. $500,000 guaranteed survivor pool. So go to splashsports.com backslash 4for4, or is it just /4for4? Splashsports.com/4for4 for all the details. $50 to enter, but it's a guaranteed pool. I don't know if it's going to fill, so that's life-changing money,
Yeah.
Addison.
Yeah, if you're good at survivors. It's not available here. I'm in PA, so it's not available here. I got to hop the border and go to Ohio or Maryland or something like that. Sign up real quick and then play. But I am very interested. Survivor pools are very, very fun. So yes, join up. Join our survivor pool for that guaranteed $500,000 to first place prize with the $50 entry, of course. That link is going to be down in the description or the show notes, depending on where you're watching, so you can easily get access to that as well. But we appreciate everybody for hanging out with us. Have a fantastic weekend and rest of your week. Next week, we will catch you guys next Friday with another episode of the Most Accurate Podcast. Until then, catch you guys later. Peace.